let's dive into another subject right now. We want to dive into the JFK files. Recently, with the Trump administration, they declassified the John F. Kennedy files. And everybody was super excited to find out, all right, you know what? What happened to one of the greatest presidents that was going to, hopefully finish his term, but unfortunately we saw what happened. How much of the CIA was involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy?
Well, first, I want to say I have a friend at the White House, and I commented to him a couple of months ago, thank God that President Trump released the rest of the JFK documents. He said, no, he didn't. I said, sure he did. He said, oh, no, he didn't. He released most of them. And I said, well, why didn't he release all of them? And he said, because the ones that are still classified point the finger right at the Israelis. So that's number one. Number two, to answer your question more specifically, I thought that what documents were released were huge, right? There's been so much speculation about CIA involvement in the Kennedy assassination for so many years. And the CIA denied and denied and denied and denied all these years, 70 years, 62 years. Well, what these documents told us was that there was CIA involvement. It may have been peripheral on the one hand, but there are two things that are critically important, I think. Number one, the CIA lied consistently about its contact with Lee Harvey Oswald. Consistently. For all these years, they said, we didn't have any contact with Lee Harvey Oswald. That is just simply not true. We know now that James Angleton, the deputy director for counterintelligence, had ordered that the CIA be in touch with Lee Harvey Oswald. We also know that Oswald, debated anti-Castro people for local TV consumption in places like Miami and New Orleans, apparently knowing that those debates were set up by the CIA. So money was expended either to recruit Oswald or to remain in touch with Oswald, number one. Number two, the conventional wisdom was that these documents would probably not tell us anything new, but that they would probably serve to confirm CIA surveillance operations in Mexico City in October and November 1963. And people were saying, scholars were saying, okay, so who were they surveilling in Mexico City? And why were they surveilling those people in Mexico City? Well, we all knew the likelihood was they were surveilling Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico City. And it turns out that they were. They watched him go to the Russian embassy or the Soviet embassy. They watched him go to the Cuban embassy. He was turned away from both places. But they knew about Oswald. How did they know about Oswald? Because they were working with him. So that was very, very important. Secondly, and this is the darker part, this is actual CIA involvement. I'm ashamed to say that there was a Greek American named George Ioannidis, who was a senior CIA officer. He was what today we would call the station chief in Miami, right? He worked his way up very, very quickly. He had been OSS briefly, then he dropped out, then he came back in like 52 or 55, something like that, moved up very quickly through operations and ended up running CIA operations from Miami. That put him in touch not just with Oswald, but with the anti-Castro Cubans. It also would have put him in touch with Santo Trafficante, the mob boss that controlled Florida at the time, Santo Trafficante Sr. And with Carlo, what's his name? Carlos Marcello or Carlo Marcello from New Orleans, the mob boss in New Orleans.
Okay.
The scholars that I'm in touch with, like Jefferson Morley, for example, I think Jeff Morley knows more about the Kennedy assassination than any other person on the planet. Jeff always maintained that there was CIA involvement in the form of George Ioannidis. And it looks like he was right. It's not that the CIA was involved as the CIA. It's that elements of the CIA were involved in the form of Ioannidis. Ioannidis was a fascist. an avowed fascist, and he hated Kennedy, and he hated communism. And it kind of looks to me like he put this secret group of people together and helped to kill Kennedy. And it would also explain why at the you can't call it a press conference. You know, when they dragged Oswald out, the cops beat him up.
Yeah, it was call it a reporter's interview.
Yeah, reporter's thing. And where he said, "I'm just a patsy." Well, nobody was ever able to explain what he meant. He was shot the next day.
Well, he looked super confused as well. When they told him the president's dead, he was like in shock.
"I'm just a patsy."
Yeah.
Well, that would account for it. That would make sense. If he had been duped into doing it, he would believe that he was a patsy. And I'll add one third thing. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is a friend of mine. He told me the most fascinating story. And I said to him, "You've got to write this down. This has like historic import." He said that on November 22nd, 1963, he was in junior high school. And his mom drove to the school to pick him up early because his uncle had just been shot. So they drove back to the house. They had a big mansion called Hickory Hill, just a quarter of a mile from the CIA's headquarters. And the Kennedys were very, very close friends with John McCone and Mrs. McCone. John McCone was the director of the CIA. Mrs. McCone had died 6 months earlier of breast cancer, and John McCone had been deeply in love with his wife, and the Kennedys were afraid that he was going to try to commit suicide. He was so distraught over the loss of his wife. So they invited him to dinner 7 nights a week. So he'd finish working at the CIA, he'd drive the quarter mile to Hickory Hill, he would have dinner with the Kennedys, and then McCone and Bobby Kennedy Sr. would go swimming together. They had a pool, indoor pool. So when Bob and his mom get out of the car, he said his father's standing in the driveway talking to McCone, and he heard his dad say, "Tell me your people didn't do this." And McCone said, "I don't know who did it." The point being, he didn't say, "Of course my people didn't do this." What would make you think that the CIA would kill the president of the United States? That's not what he said. He said, "I don't know who did it." Because he didn't trust his own people. So with what we know now about Ioannidis, who died in like 1991, I think, and never ever talked, I think that an inference can be made now that yes, even if it was unofficial involvement, we could call it CIA involvement.
If you enjoyed this short clip, go ahead and click here to watch the full episode. And make sure to click here to subscribe to our channel to watch all other episodes of the WiseNuts podcast.